Yes, children. Let us see more of transition metal properties. Transition metals, they form alloys. What are the different types of alloys that they make? Intermetallic alloys and interstitial alloys. The best example for interstitial alloy is steel, and that for intermetallic is brass, bronze. They are all intermetallic. Brass is made up of copper and zinc, and bronze is made up of copper and tin. Okay, so both are metals, and that is why you call them intermetallic. Whereas steel is iron containing carbon in the interstitial spaces. That is why it is called as interstitial alloys. Now, what are interstitial compounds? They are those when small atoms such as hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, they are trapped inside the crystal lattice of metals. Trapped inside the crystal lattice, where? In the interstitial spaces. And they are usually non-stoichiometric and are neither typically ionic nor covalent. The best examples are Fe3H, TiH 1.7. See, look the proportion 1.7, 1 is to 1.7. We never express any formula like this, is it not? Now, what are the characteristics of such interstitial compounds? They have high melting points than the pure metals. They are hard, they retain metallic conductivity, and they are chemically inert. That is why they are much more in use. Then what are intermetallic alloys? Intermetallic alloys are, it is a blend of metals prepared by mixing the components as a homogeneous solid solution in which the atoms of one metal are distributed randomly among the atoms of the other. Okay, so you have a lattice where copper atoms are there and zinc atoms are also there in the crystal lattice, occupying the lattice points. Okay, now how these two metals can be present in the same lattice? Only when the metallic radii are within about 15% of each other. If the size range is within this 15% of each other, then only both the metals can reside in the same crystal lattice. Okay, so these are called as intermetallic alloys. This is the main point that you need to understand. The atoms of one metal are distributed randomly among the atoms of the other. What is the condition behind when they can be distributed? If it is possible, if the metallic radii of the two metals, they lie within 15% of each other. The size range is within 15% of each other. And these alloys are also hard. They have high melting points. Say for example, ferrous alloys and a variety of steels. They are all coming under intermetallic alloys. Apart from that, brass, bronze, so hey. Okay. Now, a very interesting point about transition metal is that they behave as catalyst. Now, how they behave as catalyst, or why? What is the reason? They show multiple oxidation state which are interconvertible. That is very big advantage for transition metals. Now look here an example. SO2 plus V2O5. V2O5 is vanadium pentoxide. It gets converted to SO3 and it becomes vanadium tetroxide. And this vanadium tetroxide will react with atmospheric oxygen, giving rise to V2O5. So this is what I told you, interconvertible oxidation state. Now you have studied the manufacture of sulfuric acid by contact process, right? Now in this, vanadium pentoxide is used as a catalyst where SO2 is converted into SO3. Now this vanadium can show both +5 oxidation state as well as +4 oxidation state, and this +4 oxidation state will get converted to +5 in the presence of excess oxygen which is coming along with SO2 in the catalytic chamber. So because of this property. It is used in contact process. Apart from that, these transition metals, they provide a large surface area for the reactants to get adsorbed over it, form unstable intermediates which convert themselves into products. Now for this, the example is, say you take Fe3 plus I minus is giving you Fe2 plus I2. Now look here, what is happening? 3 plus is converted to 2 plus, and this 2 plus will react with persulfate. This is called as persulfate ion, and it is converted into sulfate, and this Fe2 plus is brought back to Fe3 plus form, right? So reaction between I minus and persulfate ions in the presence of Fe3 plus as catalyst. This is another example how they form unstable intermediates and it gets converted into product. So the main points are that they show multiple oxidation state which are interconvertible. They provide a large surface area for the reactants to get adsorbed and form unstable intermediates which will get converted into their products. So these are the reasons why transition metals behave as catalyst. Then these transition metals they form complexes. They form complexes by accommodating the lone pair of electrons of ligands. Now what are ligands? Ligands are nothing but nucleophiles, or they are neutral molecules having lone pair of electrons. Nucleophiles. What are nucleophiles? All negatively charged species, they are called as nucleophiles, like Cn minus, Cl minus, Br minus, CO32 minus. They are all nucleophiles. And neutral molecules having lone pair of electrons, like ammonia has a lone pair, water has 2 lone pairs. Okay, any amines, there is a lone pair of electron on nitrogen, so they are all called as ligands. And the pair of electrons, these lone pair of electrons, when they are accommodated in the empty orbitals of transition metal, they form complex. Now how? This is because of the smaller size of metal ions. Size is small and charge is high. Nuclear charge, they are high atomic number, isn't it? So they have high charge. Then availability of vacant orbitals in metal ions to accommodate the lone pair through coordinate covalent bonds. In what way ligands are attached to the transition metal ion? Through coordinate covalent bonds. Now what is coordinate covalent bond? The electron belongs to ligand and transition metal ion is giving its empty orbital. So one is giving a pair of electron and the other one is simply accommodating. Such a bond is called as coordinate covalent bond. Is it not? One is a donor and the other one is just giving space for accommodating the pair of electron. It is not 1:1 sharing. Okay. So that's how transition metals form complexes, by accommodating the lone pair of electrons of ligands in their empty orbitals. Okay. Now let us see the next concept, that is standard electrode potential. Now here thermodynamic stability of a transition metal compound is evaluated in terms of the magnitude of ionization energy. Okay. Now look here, nickel 2 compounds are more stable than platinum 2 compounds. Nickel, platinum, palladium, they are all in the same group. So you expect all 3 of them to show similar property. But then nickel is stable in one oxidation state and platinum is stable in another oxidation state. So that is the beauty of this concept. Nickel 2 compounds are more stable than Pt2 compounds, but Pt4 compounds are more stable than nickel 4 compounds. Now that is in terms of the magnitude of ionization energy it is shown. The sum of first and second ionization energy for nickel is 2.49 into 10 power 3 and that of platinum is 2.66 into 10 power 3. So it is slightly higher. Whereas the sum of third and fourth ionization energy, in the case of nickel it is 8.8 and in the case of platinum it is 6.7, which is much lesser. That is why platinum is more stable in +4 state and nickel is more stable in +2 state. Now when you consider the total of all the 4 ionization energies, you will find in the case of nickel it is 11.29, it is 9.36. So obviously platinum will exhibit +4 state and nickel cannot exhibit, right? Now based on this you have a question, that is K2 PtCl6 exists but an analogous compound of nickel does not. So this is what we explained just now. Here Pt is showing +4 oxidation state and an analogous compound of nickel cannot exhibit because nickel cannot show +4 oxidation state. So the same concept what I told you just now has to be explained. Okay, now let us see. Cu plus, it disproportionates to give you Cu and Cu2 plus. In the +1 oxidation state, it is disproportionating to give you the neutral atom and Cu in the 2 plus state. Why does it disproportionate in aqueous solution? Now the question can also be asked, Cu plus is unstable in aqueous solution. Why? It can be put in both ways. This is because Cu2 plus is associated with more negative delta H hydration, which compensates the requirement of second ionization enthalpy of copper. Now what happens when Cu ionizes? Initially Cu plus is formed and then Cu plus loses another electron to become Cu2 plus. Okay. Now here what they say, the delta H hydration of Cu2 plus is much more negative. Much more negative means what? It is highly exothermic. This conversion is highly exothermic. If this highly exothermic condition is followed, that means this Cu2 plus will be in a low energy state. ये एनर्जी बाहर दे देता है और खुद की एनर्जी बहुत लो होगी. It will be in a low energy state. So Cu2 plus is more stable than Cu plus. This is second ionization energy, this is first ionization energy, this is second ionization energy, and the delta H hydration of Cu2 plus is much more negative. So that can be easily compensated for the second ionization enthalpy of copper. Okay. So in spite of the fact that ionization energy has to be supplied, the amount of energy released during hydration is so high that it can be utilized in these two steps. That is why Cu prefers to remain in +2 state, or it disproportionates. Cu plus disproportionates in aqueous solution. Okay. Then we have the highest fluoride of manganese is MnF4, whereas the highest oxide is Mn2O7. Why? Now this is with oxygen, here it is with fluorine. Now you know very well fluorine is monovalent and oxygen is divalent. Oxygen has the ability to form multiple bonds with the metal atom, but fluorine can make only single bond. Hence, in oxides, the oxidation state of metal is higher. Now this is how this Mn2O7 is exhibiting itself, where it is showing +7 state with oxygen but only +4 state with fluorine.